From Cold War betrayals to the war on terror compromises, African voices have been traded, shelved, and forgotten. A deal in the shadows, justice traded for political favor. Why did Washington suddenly go quiet on Kanu? For decades, the United States championed itself as the defender of human rights, the voice for the voiceless, the nation that held dictators accountable. But what happens when that voice goes silent? What happens when justice becomes a bargaining chip in the shadows of power? Kanu's silence on Capitol Hill wasn't accidental. History has shown us time and again that when superpowers need something, dissent can disappear overnight. From Cold War betrayals to the war on terror compromises, African voices have been traded, shelved, and forgotten. Washington looked away, and Tinubu paid the price they asked for.
Here that Nigeria has an Igbo problem. And this, of course, emanated historically from the Civil War, where we claimed that it was no vanquished and no victor. But ultimately, there was a vanquished person. If you had 10 million naira before the war, you are giving 20 naira after the war. You are the one vanquished. It is said to you, you cannot be promoted in the army because you can't be trusted. You are the one vanquished. I'm going to sentence him to death. That was the plan. And you can check my Twitter and Facebook posts on November 5, because I was giving that information in advance. Maybe we are only lucky that we fought a bit through the Free Nnamdi Kanu protest.
Alarms. Senators were asking questions. International pressure was building. Then, nothing. The noise stopped. The scrutiny faded. The calls for accountability vanished into thin air.
Right, everyone, welcome to Post Media Services. Now, concerning Nnamdi Kanu, people have been wondering why U.S. government didn't make any form of official statement. Now, of course, making official statement on this matter shows that U.S. may not be responsible because Nigeria is a sovereign nation. But of course, we have been seeing from lawmakers and people of Igbo extraction that are in the diaspora tilting towards Nnamdi Kanu in one way or the other, supporting him, supporting his cause one way or the other, and so on and so forth. Now, I think at the time there was a particular U.S. Personality that was, I think, a lawyer that said U.S. is monitoring the result or the outcome of the court matter. But ever since Nnamdi Kanu was sentenced to life imprisonment, I don't think that that lawyer has come out to make official statement either on behalf of the United States or any United States government. Also, you know that Kanu also is a British citizen. We are not hearing from UK. Of course, UK seems to be bothered by its own domestic problem. As we all know, UK also is struggling. The economy of that country is struggling. So it has a lot in its hand than to look at individuals' matter. But of course, in this particular episode, it's going to be a detailed analysis of the issues in between that we need to look at, and why countries seems to, or world power seems not to look the way of Kanu. Then you will also listen to detailed accounts on it, and then what this country chose to, rather why individuals don't really matter to them. Instead, we always prefer to maintain a diplomatic relation and economic tie rather than coming into a space of another man's space, another country's, invading another country's sovereignty, in the name of human rights. But of course, in this video will tell a lot of it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. This is Post Media. I'll see you in another video.
Tinubu's bargain with power exposes a darker truth. Critics argue it wasn't coincidence. It was calculation. A deliberate exchange between two governments with interests to protect. When superpowers choose interests over justice, someone always pays the price. The Kanu case wasn't forgotten, it was shelved. One man detained, another protected by global silence. What did Tinubu give away for Washington's silence? Access? Cooperation? Strategic alignment in a region where China and Russia compete for influence? The details remain murky, but the pattern is undeniable. History repeats itself, Africa negotiates, dissent disappears. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Nnamdi Kanu was never supposed to be this powerful. A broadcaster. An activist. A man with a microphone and a message that resonated across borders. From his base in the United Kingdom, Kanu's voice reached millions of Igbo people across Nigeria and the diaspora. His platform, Radio Biafra, wasn't just a station, it was a movement. His words didn't whisper. They roared. And governments don't like roaring. By 2015, Kanu had become more than a provocateur. He was a symbol. His calls for Biafran independence struck at the heart of Nigeria's most sensitive wound, the memory of a civil war that killed over 1 million people. To his supporters, he was a freedom fighter demanding self-determination. To the Nigerian government, he was a terrorist inciting violence and threatening national unity. When Kanu was arrested in Lagos in October 2015, the case drew immediate international attention. Human rights groups raised concerns. The United Nations weighed in. The United States State Department issued statements about due process and rule of law. The pressure was real. The spotlight was bright. But Kanu wasn't just any dissident. He held British citizenship. That complicated things. London watched closely. Washington watched too. Nigeria's leadership found itself under scrutiny it couldn't easily dismiss. For months, the case dragged through Nigerian courts. Kanu supporters protested. His lawyers filed motions. International observers issued reports. The Nigerian government insisted it was following legal procedures, but critics pointed to irregularities, delays, and what they called politically motivated prosecution. Then something changed. In 2017, Kanu was granted bail under strict conditions. He disappeared shortly after, resurfacing in the United Kingdom. For years, he continued his broadcasts from abroad, untouchable and unsilenced. Nigeria fumed but could do nothing. Extradition requests went nowhere. Kanu remained free, his voice louder than ever. Until June 2021. That's when everything shifted. Kanu was arrested again, this time under circumstances that remained disputed. The Nigerian government claimed he was intercepted during travel. Human rights organizations alleged he was illegally renditioned from Kenya, brought to Nigeria in violation of international law. The details were murky, but the result was clear: Kanu was back in custody, facing treason charges that could carry the death penalty. And once again, the world was watching. Or so it seemed. The United States has a long history of commenting on high-profile detentions around the world. From Russia to China to Iran, the State Department routinely issues statements about political prisoners, judicial fairness, and human rights violations. Nigeria was no exception. In the early stages of Kanu's renewed detention, Washington's position seemed consistent. State Department officials spoke about the importance of due process. They emphasized that all legal proceedings should follow international standards. Human rights reports mentioned Kanu's case specifically, noting concerns about the circumstances of his arrest and the charges he faced. Members of Congress paid attention too. Nigerian diaspora groups in the United States lobbied their representatives. Letters were written. Questions were asked. For a moment, it looked like Kanu's case might become a diplomatic pressure point, an issue that could complicate US-Nigeria relations if not handled transparently. Then the noise stopped. By late 2022, references to Kanu in official US communications became sparse. State Department briefings barely mentioned him. Congressional inquiries quieted down. Human rights organizations noted the shift with confusion and frustration. What had changed? Some analysts pointed to broader geopolitical shifts. Nigeria, Africa's largest economy and most populous nation, was becoming increasingly important in a world where Western powers worried about losing influence. China had been investing heavily across the continent. Russia was making inroads through security partnerships and resource deals. The United States needed allies in West Africa, and Nigeria was the biggest prize. But there was something more specific at play. Something that went beyond general strategic interests. Observers began to notice a pattern. Around the same time Washington's public pressure on the Kanu case diminished, Nigeria's cooperation with U.S. priorities in the region increased. Counterterrorism partnerships deepened. Intelligence sharing improved. Nigerian officials aligned more closely with American positions on regional security issues. Trade discussions advanced. Energy cooperation expanded, particularly as Europe sought alternatives to Russian oil and gas. It was as if a deal had been struck, not openly, not formally, but unmistakably. Washington needed Nigeria's cooperation. Nigeria needed Washington's silence. And Nnamdi Kanu became the price of that arrangement. Bola Ahmed Tinubu didn't become president of Nigeria by accident. A former governor of Lagos, a political strategist known for his ability to build coalitions and navigate complex power dynamics, Tinubu understood leverage better than most. When he assumed office in May 2023, he inherited multiple challenges: a struggling economy, rising insecurity, ethnic tensions, and the Kanu case, a political landmine that could explode at any moment. Tinubu had options. He could release Kanu and risk backlash from security forces and northern political interests who saw the separatist leader as an existential threat. He could keep him detained and face continued international criticism. Or he could find a third way, a way to neutralize the international pressure while maintaining control domestically. According to political insiders, Tinubu chose the latter. And his strategy was masterful in its simplicity: give Washington what it wanted, and Washington would give him what he needed. What did Washington want? Stability in Nigeria. A reliable partner in West Africa. Access to Nigerian resources and markets. Cooperation on counterterrorism. Alignment on issues where American interests were at stake. Tinubu delivered. His administration signaled openness to U.S. investment. It strengthened security partnerships. It took positions on regional conflicts that aligned with American preferences. It became, in diplomatic language, a constructive partner. And in return, Washington's public pressure on the Kanu case evaporated. This wasn't unprecedented. History is filled with examples of democratic governments overlooking uncomfortable realities in allied nations. During the Cold War, the United States supported authoritarian regimes across Africa because they were anti-communist. During the War on Terror, Washington partnered with governments that had abysmal human rights records because they cooperated on security. The Kanu case fit that pattern perfectly. Here was an issue that complicated U.S.-Nigeria relations, an issue that, if pushed too hard, could damage cooperation on matters Washington considered more important. So the issue was quietly set aside. Not forgotten, but deprioritized. Not resolved, but made irrelevant to the broader relationship. Critics called it hypocrisy. Tinubu's supporters called it statecraft. But the result was the same: Kanu remained in detention, and the international community's loudest voice went silent.
Kanu's conviction, whatever they were going to do. But when they realized that maybe this is not popular or not going to be popular, they kind of pulled back a bit and did the life imprisonment. And they have also realized that even the life imprisonment has not stopped his life or the life of what he stood for. Because it came at a time that, like I've always said, he prophetically predicted some of the things that are happening in Nigeria now. And when he was eventually convicted, those things have come full circle in terms of terrorism, the unchecked activities of the people you call terrorists or bandits who have been given preferential treatments in Nigeria over time. They always have the right, they can drive around in their convoys with vehicles seized from the Nigerian army. One of them wore a uniform of a police commissioner, an assistant police commissioner he killed. He wore his uniform to town. They were carrying their magazines and their heavy-duty weapons and ammunition and addressing press conferences. I insist that till date, the only evidence that was adduced against Nnamdi Kanu in this trial, the whole trial, was that he had a microphone and he had a radio transmitter and his underwear, both top and bottom, that he found in a hotel.
Sometimes what isn't said reveals more than what is. By mid-2024, the absence of American pressure on the Kanu case had become glaring. State Department human rights reports mentioned him in passing, but without the urgency that typically accompanies cases Washington cares about. No high-level officials called for his release. No congressional delegations raised the issue during visits to Nigeria. No sanctions were threatened. No diplomatic consequences were suggested. Compare this to other cases. When Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was imprisoned, the United States imposed sanctions and withdrew ambassadors. When Hong Kong activists were detained, Washington passed legislation and restricted trade. When journalists were jailed in Turkey, American officials publicly demanded their release. But for Nnamdi Kanu, there was only silence. Nigerian civil society groups noticed. International human rights organizations noticed. And they began to ask uncomfortable questions. Why had a case that once commanded international attention been allowed to fade into obscurity? What had changed? The answers, when they came, were indirect. Unnamed diplomatic sources suggested that other priorities had taken precedence. That Nigeria's cooperation on matters of mutual interest was too valuable to jeopardize. That pushing too hard on Kanu could damage relationships that served broader American interests. Translation: Kanu had been sacrificed for strategic convenience. But the evidence went beyond mere absence. There were also positive signals, moments when Washington seemed to actively reward Nigeria for its cooperation. High-level visits increased. Trade delegations arrived. Security assistance packages were approved. President Tinubu received invitations to international summits where African leaders weren't always welcome. The message was clear: cooperate with us, and we'll cooperate with you.